Now we have this app available, but how is it actually being built? This is actually a module combined with a component. So let's start out with the components. We'll get back to the modules when we start building more components. But let's just start out with the components. So I'm opening the code again, and if you look here, we have the AppComponent TS file. And this is kind of the guy that right now is the only component we have available, and that pretty much just displays this page that you just looked at a second ago. Now, what can the component tell us? First of all, this is just a plain Typescript class, and it's just so TypeScript, just like a C# class or Java class, is just a class, right? It's just a class, and that class is importing stuff just like we're doing with the using statement in C#. So it's just importing, right? So we're grabbing some kind of Angular core, and it doesn't matter right now what it is, but think of this as a class that we need to use. So this is like for me to start explaining to this TS file that you are actually a specific class of the type component. So it's kind of an extension, right, of a basic class. Now when I explain to this class that it is a component, I can give it information about what the component needs to know. So for instance, I can explain when you want to use this component, you're going to put in the tag. Notice I'm saying tag here, like an HTML tag, like we have a P tag, we have we have an input tag, we have so many different tags in HTML. Now I've made a new tag called AppRoot, and where do I use that? Let's try and open the index page just to show you guys that right here I'm actually adding in the body, the first tag is AppRoot. Now this is not a real HTML tag, this is actually an Angular specific tag that I built now using this selector. So I'm explaining that I'm going to make a component here, and when you want to use this, you just have to add a tag called AppRoot. If I wrote AppSnurf right here instead of AppRoot, like this, and I copied that and put it inside the index HTML file right here, instead of saying AppRoot, I'll say AppSnurf, like this. I'll save it, and I'll save it. Now notice down here, by the way, it's just recompiling everything automatically, and if you're on a proper machine, it'll be so fast you won't even see it. And if I go in here now, you'll see reloading and everything looks fine still, right? But let's just try and go back now. Instead of writing snurf, I'll write like this, snurf, 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 and I'll try and rebuild everything, and now it'll explode, right? Because now it can't find that tag, so it's gone, right? So that's every time you put in a selector, that's a tag, right, inside HTML. So let's just put this back into what it was. AppRoot like this again, and go back to the index page and put it back to AppRoot. So now you know kind of how these guys work together, right? So this is how you make your first component. You explain, again, it is a component, and the tag I want to use is AppRoot. The template URL and the style URL, that's just explaining for this component, where should I put the HTML? You need to put the HTML into a file called AppComponent.html, and you need to put the CSS into a file called AppComponent.css. You can do it this differently, and we might look at that later, but let's not do it this lesson. So that means that right now I'm saying inside the folder that this file resides, by doing the // there should also be a file called AppComponent.html. And guess what? If I look over here, there is an AppComponent.html and there is an AppComponent.css file. The AppComponent.css file is empty right now. Let's just open it. There's nothing in there. And the AppComponent.html file actually shows something with an H1 that says welcome to some title we'll talk about next time. And then it has an image, and that image has some kind of data that we'll talk about next time as well. But what does that actually end up with? So let's just try and have a look. Let's write welcome to this awesome, and let's try and save this now and go into the application. Notice I'm not touching anything, no magic here, and it automatically refreshes in a second, because Webpack takes care of actually every time you do a save and change a file, it actually automatically refreshes. Let's just see if I forgot to do a save here. I actually did. So now it should be saved now, and again, I'm not touching anything. There we go. Automatically it refreshed the browser and shows you the new text I put in there. So that's kind of how the HTML is presented inside the component. That's this AppComponent.html file. The AppComponent.ts file knows about that by actually going and explaining that inside that symbol template URL right here, that's the HTML file. Template style URL, that's the actual simple CSS file. Let's end it here. Now you know what a component is. At least you know how to launch it. Now let's talk more about the component next.